Can do, Melanin. I'm back with the Voynich Manuscript interpretation. I'm going to wait and see other people pop on. If you can hear me, let me know, because that would be great. I am going to discuss this book right here. I took off the actual book jacket. You can get this book on Amazon for about $36. It's about $36 on Amazon. Greetings to Bari. Can you hear me? How's it sound? Okay. Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, great. Good. It's a go. So I'm going to talk about this book because one thing that scholars have never really been able to understand is the energy behind the book and the intention behind it. As an empath and as somebody who resonates with the elves and fairies, if you are new to my channel, I am an Elvenkin. I am a soul that expresses himself as an elf in this lifetime, whether I have had a past life as an elf or that is my future destiny. That still is very much a mystery to me. All I know is that I resonate very much with the elves and especially the elves of Tolkien. So looking at the Voynich Manuscript has been really an amazing journey for me because I have, how long is the stream? I don't know. We will see. There is a lot to talk about with this book because one of the things that I realized when I started learning about the Voynich Manuscript, people really feel that it is the most mysterious book in the world. And immediately when I saw the pictures and I saw the language that is unidentified, it doesn't exist on Earth to scholars, I am able to kind of understand the book in a different way. And immediately when I saw the pictures and the illustrations, I immediately thought about the elves and the nature wisdom that these type of beings have held. And so the fairies are kind of known as, they're like the guardians over certain aspects of nature. And the elves are like the keepers of the wisdom. They kind of represent the general whole understanding of nature and what nature reflects to humans. And all about astronomy and astrology and the cosmology, like everything that they understand about in the universe is also related to nature. So in this book that has been kept in the Vatican for a very long time before it was handed over to the Harvard University, in this book is things about the astronomy and things about zodiacs and astrology mixed with nature. So hence, it absolutely has elven energy attached to it. So very interesting to me. And as I read it, I just felt this kind of flood of familiarity coming in. So I want to take time and I want to go through this book. So let's begin. One thing that you should understand about me is I am an ancient astronaut believer. I believe that we have been visited in the past by alien species that have tried to help humanity and give wisdom, technology, and tools to help them on their evolutionary path. I do believe that there has been benevolent alien beings that have tried to help humanity. And then I also believe that there were not so benevolent ones, that they were more, nefarious in their intention and they wanted to just rule over humans. And a lot of the gods and goddesses that we know of in religion, they were maybe evoked from these types of beings that came onto our planet. As I spoke about before, the Anunnaki in the Sumerian text, they are said that they have said that they created humans to mine for gold for them because that was a precious resource to them. So that being understood, that I am coming from the place of understanding that we could have had extraterrestrial life that has actually come to our planet and has tried to help humanity as well as hinder their process as well, because everything's a duality. So not all beings are going to be good from all over the universe, and not all beings are going to be all evil. But reading this book and going through the pictures and the illustrations, I have definitely interpreted it as coming from a benevolent, a kind source of wisdom and knowledge to give to humans. And it can be interpreted in two different ways. Either it was written by the same hand as a human scribe, because it's all basically in the same language and it has the same type of illustration. Either it was a human scribe that was channeling higher dimensional energy and messages from these beings, these elven beings, or it was actually the elven beings themselves that put together this book and was hoping that humanity would find it later on. One of the things about this book that's interesting is that it wasn't really decorative. It wasn't, gilded with gold. It wasn't really a very fancy looking book at all. It was just kind of a manuscript. It was just scrolls that were bunched together. And you can see when I open up the book, I mean, this is basically what it just looked like. It was just on paper, and it just had the illustrations, but it wasn't very fancy at all. But I guess the wisdom inside of it and the knowledge inside of it was enough for the Vatican to actually take into, their vaults, and they had it there for a long time. And then it was actually purchased by a Jesuit priest. And I will read you the letter of how it actually got to Harvard. One of the things that you should know is that it doesn't have a name. There has never been a name for the manuscript, but they call it the Voynich Manuscript because of the one who actually bought it and was able to release it to the public, because it was in secrecy in the Vatican vaults for a very long time. So I'm very excited to read this, because for a very long time I have wanted to know what's inside of the Vatican vaults, that there's a lot of secrecy there. And so this is one of the books that have managed to get out, and now we have actually a chance to try to decipher it and try to understand what the knowledge is inside. So I'm going to start out with the letter that was written by a relative of William M. Voynich. So it actually was written, if you can see, this is his letterhead. It says William N. Voynich, that's his letterhead. So this letter was actually written by a relative of William N. Voynich, and this is what he wrote. The cipher manuscript was bought by W.H. Voynich in or about 1911. It was a property of the Vatican and was in a castle at Frascati. The intermediary through whom he approached the Vatican authorities was the English Jesuit Father Joseph Strickland, who had, I believe, some connection with Malta, Father Strickland, and who had since died, knew that the sale of certain manuscript had been decided upon if a buyer could be found whose discretion could be trusted. Whether this secrecy was because of the strained relations, I do not know, but Father Strickland gave his personal assurance that W.M. Voynich could be trusted, and on that assurance, he was allowed to buy after giving a promise of secrecy. He told me at the time in confidence, feeling that someone should know in case of his death. For the same reason, I am leaving this statement in the safe in case of my death. E.L. Voynich, July 19, 1930. Okay? So right there, you can see that the Voynich manuscript has been wrapped around secrecy for a very long time. And enough where Father Strickland had to see if Voynich would actually keep it secret, because the information contained is actually something that truly is something that really is very powerful. And if it's not in the right hands, it could be dangerous in a sense. I was very, let me just tell you my experience of interpreting this. As an empath and getting an energetic read from the book, I was very surprised to actually look at the illustrations And I can't understand the language, but I can kind of get an energy sense of what the language is. And looking at the illustrations, I got a very interesting sense that it's beyond just our normal understanding about nature. That the wisdom in here is truly life-changing and transformative. And while I was reading it, I had very strange energy inside of me, very excited energy. I was vibrating very highly. And I actually went through and read about 100 illustrations. There's about 107 colored illustrations in here. So I really took the time, one after another, to actually go through and understand what these drawings really meant. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about is I did handwriting analysis. As a psychic, I believe in handwriting analysis, and I believe that you can read the energy of people by looking at their handwriting. Also, the Criminal Defense Department also believes that too. Looking at the handwriting itself and looking at the way that the manuscript was written, I will give you my interpretation of the personality of the one who actually wrote this. And here it is. So my personality of the author that I was able to interpret is they are reasonable, sane, and logical. They have balanced lines, and they're pretty straight up and down. There's no leaning to the side, there's no moving upward, and there's no going downward, which if you write without lines, and if someone is writing upwards, they're usually considered to be very futuristic, very optimistic. And if they're writing downwards, then they can be considered very pessimistic, kind of preoccupied with the past. The one who wrote this is all pretty much perfectly straight. So either they used a tool to help them with keeping that balance and that straightness of their lines, or they simply were just truly very logical, very sane, and very right up and down type of writer. I am actually that way. I have a little bit of a curve upwards, but most of my writing, if I don't have lines, will end up and down. So that suggests a pretty balanced person between their emotional side and their logical side. There's a sense of importance or grandiosity with their ornate style. So there is an ornate type of style of writing. It reminds me very much of Tolkien's Elvish script. I don't know if you can see that, but you can go online and you can actually get closer. I was trying to think about how I was going to be able to show you, but there's a lot of curls on every end. Almost every word on the end is always a swirl up with their W. There is a lot of swirlies. They even kind of connect letters together in kind of a Celtic type of loop. If you know what that means, it's kind of like a figure 8. So they do with that with a lot of their letters. There is a sense of importance with this type of writing, where it has a sense of, elevation to it. This is not somebody that has confidence issues or self-esteem issues. This is somebody who feels very assured of themselves, not necessarily egotistic at all, because their balance is there with their logic. But there's definitely a sense of importance there. They're also a realist, so they're not optimistic or pessimistic. As I said, they don't go upward in their writing, and they actually don't go downward in their writing as well. So it's very straightforward up and down. So that's my handwriting analysis of the actual author. The second thing I want to talk about too. Hi, David. I cannot read all of that. That is a lot going on. I'm just going to keep on continuing here, but I'll get to your questions at the end. The one thing about the drawings right off the bat is they are not precise in their execution, meaning they are more impressionistic, they are dreamy-like, there is a type of kind of Monet kind of quality to them. They are not at all drawings of what we would think about with our planet, our plants and our flowers here on Earth. They may be earthly plants and flowers, but they're not drawn in that kind of way. I noticed that they use a variety of colors. They're very precise with numbers and details, though. And they also have come up with their own kind of color key, kind of code to document. And what I mean by that is that on their drawings, they're not just using blues and greens just to signify a particular, like, oh, blue is water, and then the brown is the stem, and then, you have the green as the leaves. They're not matching it so much with nature. They are, but they are also having kind of a color code that's supposed to mean something more spiritually. Blue represents the water, but it's the nurturing, the healing part of water. Green represents life, the sun essence and the energy. Brown represents the roots and the foundation and the source. So keep that in mind as we go through. That color actually represents energetic type of frequency, rather than just looking at a plant or a flower as what the color is. It goes deeper than that. So there's a lot of color therapy being used in here. The other thing is, to the emotional energy of this manuscript is that these beings, whoever was involved with writing this, they are lovers of nature. They, the writer themselves are alone. They had to be an introvert to spend time alone that much in nature and enjoy it so much. And it took many, many years to actually complete this manuscript and have it fully dedicated to nature. So they were outside, and you'll see that some of the illustrations are, they pull up the plant from the roots. And they actually are looking at the roots and they're drawing it from there. This took a lot of time. This is not something that, somebody just sat down and did in a year. This actually took quite a long time. There was no lack of love from the cosmos, meaning that a lot of love went into this manuscript. This is a person that feels very connected to everything. And there's also a lot of divine feminine energy within it. And I will explain that later, probably in part 2 when we get more into that. But that is the type of energy that I felt right away when I looked at the illustrations. The other thing I wanted to say is that it's not exact in the illustrations. There's a free spirit behind it. They may have more of a dreamer type to them, but they have serious goals and they take themselves very seriously and have a sense of importance behind them. They do have a desire to obtain wisdom or knowledge, or to pass it on to others. So this book was either written as an investigation deeper into the knowledge of nature and the wisdom of nature, or it was written to actually pass on that knowledge and that wisdom to humanity later on when they found it. Okay, so that is the very general basis interpretation that I saw as soon as I opened up the manuscript and looked at it for myself. When I heard about the Voynich Manuscript and I looked at the illustrations on YouTube or something, someone was just doing a quick 5-minute video on it, I immediately felt Elven fairy energy behind it. So I wanted to go more deeper into it because it is still one of the most mysterious books on earth, and nobody really knows what where or who wrote it. Okay, now I want to begin with the very first part of it. She goes into the woman and who's kind of the interpreter and also the editor. They kind of show how there's been other styles of books like this before in the past. So during this time, when the Catholic Church was involved with art and, showing that type of connection to God, they were using art a lot. So a lot of the drawings are kind of similar in a sense. You have a tree of life here. I don't know if you can see that. There's a tree of life. You have Adam and Eve being represented, and you have the 7 sins and virtues around them. It says spiritus up here, and it says anima. Spiritus is spirit, and anima is soul. So that type of language is very, very common back at this time. And so he talks about this, like showing that there's this kind of similarity, but there's not, because it doesn't go into the occult. It's more about nature, purely nature and astronomy. And so there isn't anything that has to do with Catholicism. There's nothing that has to do with actually going towards religion, which is maybe why the Vatican wanted to lock it away. Not that it disproves any Catholic ideas, but that it wasn't something that was in direct a proof of Catholicism, basically. This is what it originally looked like. So it kind of looks like, you know, just plain, what is it? Limp vellum. And it was actually used with a type of skin from an animal was the cover. So they did use skin from an animal, which is kind of interesting. So I want to talk about this. In the very beginning part here, I actually wrote, there's very Elvish Tolkien script. There's curls, there's swirls, there's trills, and it's got a kind of a Celtic-like signature to it. So right now it's at the Yale University Library, and they really, literally, to make this book, they just made wonderful copies and put it together in a bound book. But if you can see the script, and you can probably go online and you can get a little bit closer, but if you can see, there's like leaves in the background. So you have the leaves on the background, and then you also have the actual script on top. And so it's very interesting to see that kind of detail. They were very, they thought that that was very important to put that detail on almost every page that has something to do with nature. So it's not simply like a scientific journal of somebody just investigating nature. This person took time. There's art behind it to make it beautiful and to make it something that, you know, could be considered precious and something that could be considered sacred later on. Because if it was just simply a kind of a scientific journal, it would simply have the plants, and then you would have the definitions written down by it, and you know, the observations of that certain plant. But this actually takes time. The manuscript takes time to put more art into it and to make it a little bit more elaborate and more kind of decorated. It doesn't look like anything on the outside, but on the inside, it's very beautiful and full of a lot of nature pictures here. So here you can see more starting out. So I have here the Elven wisdom is that there's diversity coming from the same roots. So what I did was I looked at each picture, and if you can tell here, this is a very strange plant. We don't have this on Earth, okay? We don't have this on Earth where you have two totally different colored leaves on the same plant. So they were actually doing a more spiritual message within a picture. And that is how a lot of this book really is. It is not just simply interpretations or observations on plants. It is taking spiritual ideas and interpretations and observations on the world and then showing how nature reflects that. So what I put for this first one here, where did I buy the book, Buddy Chip? I bought it on Amazon. You can actually find it on Amazon, but you can probably find it in a bookstore. Yeah, it's very easy to find now. So with this picture, it shows that the diversity is coming from the same roots. So you have the yellow and you have the green coming from the same exact roots. I put no plant has two different colored leaves from the same stems, which I said. So this is, like I said, it's a spiritual message about diversity coming from the same roots. This was the very first page. This is probably to try to introduce that idea of that they're going to be taking pictures of nature and to describe it for a spiritual meaning. Second picture here is describing the root system and how all sources of energy from source, so from the one source I always talk about, wherever we're all from and why we are all interconnected, this is saying that the root source, the root system, and how all source of energy from the source reaches all points of the plant, whether a leaf or stem or actual flower petals. So here you can see the brown. Here you can see there is brown energy coming through. And this is showing, like I said, in the picture key, the green represents the essence, life force. And the brown is actually representing root force, source. So you have life force and you have the source. And the blue is going to represent the healing and the nurturing, which we will get into more. So this is the second spiritual message here that they're trying to show, is that all energy from the source will hit all parts of creation, whether it's just simply the stems or the leaves, or eventually up to the flowers. All emanates from the same source here. Third, hopefully you can see this much better here now. So I have a lily pad is floating on top of the water and has its roots on the bottom of the waterbed. Free spirits, things that seem unattached, are from source too. So immediately I got this idea that they were trying to show that even on the top of a pond where a lily pad sits and you have the flower, the lily on the top, that even the lily pad has a connection to the source as well on the bottom. So this is an observation of how lily pads are even connected to their stems. And so they're not simply just floating, freely, like they're also connected. And then if you ever been to a lily pond, they have several of those stems connecting them. So it looks like the lily pad is actually floating on the surface by itself, but it's actually connected to a stem here. Now we get into some strange ones as well. So here we have the different colors. Like I said, not really a plant that we have on Earth, but it's more about the interpretation. So here it shows the way that the energy from the soil and the nutrients from the soil will go through all of the leaves. So this is, once again, an observation of how nature actually works. And I put here duality coming from the same source. Roots are the same color, but the duality of emptiness and void. So I don't know if you can see this here, but you have a empty space. These are the empty spaces here. And then you have the green, the life source. So it shows kind of the duality inside of nature, because you have the different pipelines of how the plants get their nutrients. So here it says that the duality of emptiness or void versus the life essence is seen. Each side produces different results. So here you can see that they're trying to show that the brown leaves are the dried up leaves. And then you have the source energy coming up even into those. But if they don't get enough nutrients, then the leaves start to die. And if they do get enough nutrients from the source, then the leaves will turn green and they will live. So it's trying to show how everything comes from the nutrients and the soil, and determining the pathway that it goes will determine if that leaf actually falls off and dies, or if it actually will remain green and fresh and full of life. Okay, here's a very strange one. See that blue flower? Isn't that interesting? So here it is. So this was a very interesting one, and you can see the leaf here. So I put alien plant because immediately when I saw this, I was like, there is no plant like this on Earth right now. But what I believe that they were trying to show was that when everything comes from source and everything is full of the life essence of the green, because you see this is green, this is not brown. But when everything comes from the source as the brown, the root source, and then it turns into life essence, then it turns into something really beautiful, strange, magical. And so it shows that there is going to be more duality in future. There's more opportunity for life in the future because everything comes from the source, goes through the life essence of the leaves, and then becomes a beautiful flower. But it's not a flower that you would necessarily see on Earth, but it's something that whoever was writing this was trying to show that life can be full of mystery and strangeness and really truly bring kind of a surprise to the future if you allow it to. If you are fully connected to source, you will have some really amazing opportunities and really interesting futures kind of developed from that. All right, next one here is the diversity blossoms freely beautiful on earth with applying the same wisdom. So now we have the duality completely in sync with each other. If you can see, you've got brown and you have green, and they are completely intermingled and they are one. So they come from the same source, and now you have diversity, and it just makes a beautiful plant that once again doesn't really exist on Earth. We don't have that type of plant where we have two different leaves on the same type of stem, but it is just showing once again how with the source energy that diversity actually can flourish, and it looks really beautiful together. And diversity is something that really is very prominent in nature. And this person was trying to show that. All right, this one is very strange, if you can see. Look at that. Probably do only a couple more because I know that this is going to be long, and then I will do a part 2 later on. So I have here, every stage of a planet or Earth provides a gateway opening into a new level until reaching the top, which is the flowers. There's a stargate into the cosmos. So I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually different levels of stars here. So they put a starburst here, a starburst here, and a starburst on top of the flower as well. So it's showing that from source, and when the life energy comes through, you can have a stargate open up here, new possibilities, and another branching here, and then a stargate here, and then you have kind of the full flower. And even after the full flower is another stargate. This shows me that there's kind of multiple dimensions of reality. And in here, that's probably what it's trying to say. One of the things that you can tell the way that it's written is that it's not written like a scientific journal where you would have it kind of showing each part of the plant that they were writing about. If it was a scientific journal, it might have more of the letters here to show talking about the roots, here to show that it's talking about the leaves. This is a story. This right here is a poem or a story. Something that is written more prose-like and to kind of a holistic interpretation of the drawing and why they drew that picture in the first place. Here it is again. All wisdom here becomes revealed as one, pointing to the one infinite true source. So here we have very strange plant here. And then you have a little opening up of another tinier plant, the same type of shape. And then at the very top is a flower. So this is almost showing me that when I immediately saw this, I saw this kind of this revealing and this opening up, and using the nature wisdom in order to have things reveal secrets to you so that you get closer and closer to the source. And then as closer and closer to source you get, the more you realize that everything is kind of a fractal, in the sense that this larger image opens up here, or this larger plant opens up here. And then at the very top, there's another plant that's the same shape that opens up as well. And then at the very top is a little flower. Okay, how about a few more? Now here I have, this looks a bit like English ivy, but it's not completely like it, but it definitely does look a little bit like English ivy. When two souls come together from the same source of the infinite wisdom, produces flowers, symbolizing true potential or better future reached. So this is a very interesting plant. I don't know if you can see that, guys. So right here is kind of a branch of two different leaves, I guess, with the brown source energy running through it. So you got the brown color, and then you have a blue flower. But here is all the green plants, the green leaves of the English ivy. I don't know if it is English ivy, but it looks very similar to it, kind of what the Lothlorien leaf was. And then you have this very interesting kind of loop here that shows interconnection. So here you have the stem going up, and then it loops together, and then it branches off into two parts with the brown source foundation energy, and then it produces a flower. And this writing is little tiny bit. So this is a couple sentences that overall interprets this message. So once again, it's not a scientific journal. It's not trying to show, well, this is the roots, and I'm observing this about the roots, and this is this type of leaf, and I'm categorizing this leaf, and then this is the type of flower. No, this is a couple sentences of a whole picture approach of what this picture and is trying to illustrate. And that's how you kind of have to read this book. I went through, and as you can see, I put my notes on everything here. So instead of me going through every single part of it, and I'll get through part 2, maybe I'll do part 2 tomorrow, because then that's when it starts getting into astrology and into space and zodiac signs. I'm going to take some questions right now, and let's see what we have. So I'm just going to go up and read a little bit here. Where did you buy the book? I think I told you. Yes. So the interesting thing is, Dabari, I thought that this book would contain information about healing energy. I thought it would be kind of like what a herbalist would use the book as, but it doesn't necessarily go into the healing properties of the plants. What it's doing is it's kind of showing, like I said, a spiritual message behind the illustration of the plants. If it was more about the healing properties, and I definitely think that it does talk about that as well. But because the plants are so strange and they're not really a good image of what we have on Earth, it is more about kind of a dreamy interpretation of what each of the plants represent. Although I do believe that there's healing energy in these illustrations as well, because with that type of knowledge, you also have an understanding of how to heal yourself. That when you see everything from the same roots and the same source, things are not as hard to go through in your life. and you start realizing that you really truly are from the same one source as everyone else. So there's no competition. This book is completely written in the idea of bringing forth harmony and diversity and unity. And I can see that in the illustrations. I'll go into more of them. I'll pick like some of the most strangest ones, and we'll get into part 2 a little bit more about it. But let me take any other questions. No, it's not. It's not written by a jinn, which is said to be a spirit of fire. In the Quran, it's not a jinn, because this is completely water-based and earth-based energy. So it's definitely more fae, which are not really related to the fire spirits unless you get into elementals, which are designated for particular types of energy. Like you have the water elements and you have the fire elementals, the salamanders, as it was called by Paracelsus. But this is actually written by somebody that has more of, there's divine feminine energies attached to it, there's more healing water, and there's more earth energies. So it's not at all related to fire. And I'm going to get it more into the feminine aspect of it tomorrow, because that will be part 2. I don't want to make this too long. But I don't think scholars have actually gotten a chance to look at it from an energetic kind of spiritual way, because you really do have to understand it, you really do have to see it from kind of a larger picture view, because it's not really written like a scientific journal on observations of a plant. Of course, it does show that someone is able to pull up plants from the roots and to, draw what they are observing, but it's not necessarily just about science, and it's not necessarily just about the healing principles of each plant, although that information could be contained in the actual writing. It itself is also a deeper spiritual message of how nature reflects us on the inside and reflects everything that we see. Nature has all the answers. And so this book is trying to give more of that. And the reason why I came up with more of that interpretation rather than a kind of an observational journal is that later on you get into astrology, the zodiac signs, and even a lot of different type of naked women, kind of nymph characters that appear. And they are actually part of the plants themselves. And it shows that towards the end. So I'll talk more about that in part 2. Before I go, is there any other questions? Let's see. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, I will see you on part 2. I'm going to pick out a couple more of these illustrations that get very deep and are more intuitive art. And then I will talk more about the astrology and the zodiac part of it tomorrow. And then also the divine feminine energies that come in as well. There is a reason why it was kept in secrecy from the Vatican for a very long time. And I do want to say that towards the end, there are some parts. This is a really big pull out here. Towards the end, there are some parts where you have little vials and you have it labeled like this. Do you see? There's smaller versions of the plants, and then they have them labeled. These are not the same exact plants, but they pretty much are a smaller version of the ones that I went through. So then it's showing that this plant can actually be used for a particular healing ointment. So this is definitely part of the kind of the medieval times of using nature to heal certain ills and certain diseases. So it goes into that. But then, once again, you get more into some interesting things, and you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a 7-pointed star. All of these are 7-pointed stars or 7-pointed flowers. So you have the Elvican symbol in the back. All of these are the Elvican or the fairy star symbol. So I'll get more into that for part 2 as I get more deeper into the book, because it really does kind of evolve and get very interesting towards the end. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you all tomorrow. Namarie.